The first rule of power was carved into Silas Voss's bones. Never let them see you break. He built his criminal empire on that mantra, smuggling routes that spanned 3 continents, politicians in his pocket, rival families that vanished before they dared raise a fist. In the dimly lit backrooms of Chicago's underworld, Silas wasn't just an alpha. He was a force of nature, his silence heavier than any threat, his pheromones sharp enough to make grown men cower. But power had its limits. It couldn't bring back his husband, Elias, killed in the car bombing 6 months prior. And it couldn't calm his son. The private lounge of Voss's waterfront mansion reeked of tension and expensive bourbon. 5 alpha lieutenants sat around the mahogany table, their voices low and dangerous as they haggled over territory splits. Silas leaned back in his leather chair, black suit immaculate, silver streaks in his dark hair catching the firelight. His amber eyes were colder than the lake outside, his jaw set in a line that brooked no argument. He'd already shut down 3 petty disputes when the first whimper cut through the room. It was small, almost swallowed by the murmur of negotiations, but Silas's head snapped up. Across the room, near the velvet couch, his 5-year-old son, Leo, stood frozen. The boy's tiny hands twisted in the hem of his dinosaur sweater, his chest heaving as if he couldn't catch his breath. One of the lieutenants, Gideon, hot-headed and newly promoted, had slammed his fist on the table during a fight over the West Side docks, his territorial pheromones spiking like a wildfire. For Leo, it was a trigger. The whimper turned into a gasp, then a full-blown sob. Leo's knees buckled, and he crumpled to the floor, tears streaming down his face as he clawed at his throat. "Daddy," he wailed, his voice cracking. "Make it stop. Too loud, too much." The room went dead silent. Every alpha froze, their eyes darting between Silas and the child. No one spoke. No one moved. To witness an alpha's air fall apart like this was unheard of, a sign of weakness that could unravel everything Silas had built. Silas was on his feet in an instant, his movements controlled but urgent as he crossed the room. He knelt, gathering Leo into his arms, his large hands framing the boy's trembling shoulders. "Leo," he said, his voice steady, though his own pheromones simmered beneath the surface, protective, feral, desperate. "Breathe with me. In and out. You're safe." But Leo wasn't safe. He arched away from Silas, his small body convulsing with sobs. "No, your smell too strong," he cried, burying his face in his hands. "I want Papa. I want Elias." Silas's jaw tightened so hard it ached. He tried everything. Therapists specializing in alpha-omega trauma, scent-blocking sprays, even redesigning the mansion to have safe rooms with neutral pheromone filters. Nothing worked. Leo's trauma had rewritten his instincts. Any strong alpha scent, even his father's, felt like a threat. The lieutenants shifted uncomfortably, their pheromones souring with embarrassment and unease. Gideon opened his mouth to apologize, but Silas cut him off with a glare. "Suppress it," he snapped, his voice low and dangerous. "All of you. Now." The alphas complied immediately, forcing their pheromones down until the air felt thin, almost sterile. But the damage was done. Leo's sobs grew louder, his breathing rapid and shallow, hyperventilation, Silas realized with a sick twist of his stomach. He pulled the boy closer, rocking him gently, but Leo only struggled harder, his nails digging into Silas's forearms. "Sir." The voice was soft, not fearful, but steady enough to cut through the chaos of Leo's cries. Silas's head snapped up, his amber eyes narrowing as he identified the speaker. An Omega, standing in the doorway of the lounge, tray in hand. He couldn't have been older than 26, with chestnut hair tied back in a neat bun, a white dress shirt tucked into black slacks, and a silver name tag that read Kai. He was a server at the mansion's private events, one Silas barely remembered hiring. His posture was straight, not submissive, his green eyes calm as they locked onto Silas's. "Get out," Gideon snarled before Silas could speak. "Staff doesn't belong in here during a meeting." Kai didn't even glance at Gideon. His gaze stayed on Leo, his expression softening. "He's not misbehaving," he said quietly. "He's having a panic attack. Your pheromones, even suppressed, they're overwhelming him. His body thinks he's in danger." Silas's fingers tightened around Leo's waist. Anger flared hot in his chest. Anger at the Omega's audacity. Anger that someone so lowly would dare lecture him about his own son. But beneath the anger was a sharp, ugly truth. Kai was right. Silas had spent months denying it, but Leo's trauma wasn't just grief. It was a physical reaction to the world Silas ruled. A world of alphas, of dominance, of power that felt like a noose around his son's neck. "Do you think I don't know my own son's limits?" Silas asked, his voice cold enough to make Kai's shoulders tense. Just slightly, not enough to be noticeable to anyone but Silas. "I think you're so focused on controlling the threat," Kai replied, his voice never wavering, "that you're missing what he actually needs." He took a slow step forward, his movements deliberate, non-threatening. The tray in his hands remained steady. "May I? Just 2 minutes. I won't touch him. I won't interfere with you. But if you let him keep spiraling, he'll pass out from lack of oxygen." The lieutenants let out a collective breath. No one spoke to Silas Voss like this. No one questioned his decisions, especially not an Omega server. Gideon reached for the gun at his hip, but Silas held up a hand, stopping him. He studied Kai, his eyes searching for fear, for deception, for any sign of weakness. But Kai's green eyes were clear, his jaw set in quiet determination. There was no submission in him, not false, not genuine. Just a quiet confidence that Silas found unsettling and strangely compelling. Leo let out a choked sob, his body going limp in Silas's arms as exhaustion set in. Silas's resolve cracked. 2 minutes, he said, his voice gravelly. "If you so much as look at him the wrong way." "I won't," Kai said, cutting him off gently. He took another step forward, stopping a few feet away from Silas and Leo. He set the tray down on a nearby table, his movements slow and deliberate, then knelt to the floor, a level with Leo, but not close enough to be threatening. He didn't release any pheromones, not yet. Silas would have smelled it, sharp and cloying like most Omega scents. Instead, he just spoke, his voice soft as a whisper. "Hi there," Kai said, his gaze warm as it met Leo's tear-stained eyes. Kai. That was a really loud noise, huh? And all those big scents, they must feel like a lot, don't they?" Leo's sobs stuttered. He buried his face in Silas's chest, but his shoulders relaxed just a fraction. Silas felt it, a small, fragile shift that made his heart race. He tried everything, talking softly, holding Leo, even letting him sleep with Elias's old sweaters, but nothing had calmed him this quickly. Kai didn't push. He stayed where he was, his hands resting on his knees. "I know that feeling," he said quietly. "Like your chest is too tight, and you can't breathe, and everything feels scary. But you're not alone. Your dad's right here, keeping you safe. And I'm right here, too. We won't let anything hurt you." Slowly, so slowly Silas could barely track it, Kai released a wisp of his pheromones. It wasn't like the sweet, cloying scent of most Omegas. This was warm, like cedar and rain, soft and grounding, not demanding attention. It wrapped around them like a blanket, not aggressive, not suggestive, just calming. Silas felt it brush against his senses, and something in him relaxed, unbidden. He hadn't realized how tense he was, how tightly he'd been holding himself back, until Kai sent ease the knot in his chest. Leo's breathing slowed. He lifted his head from Silas's chest, his red-rimmed eyes locking onto Kai's. "You smell nice," he mumbled, his voice shaky. Kai smiled, a small, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Thank you. It's my calm scent. My mom used to call it my rain cloud. It helps when things feel too big." He tilted his head slightly, his gaze gentle. "Do you want to try breathing with me? In for 4 counts, hold for 2, out for 6. Like this." He demonstrated, his chest rising and falling slowly. Leo hesitated, then nodded. He copied Kai's breathing, his small chest stuttering at first, then evening out. Silas watched transfixed, as the color returned to his son's cheeks, as the panic faded from his eyes. In less than 2 minutes, Kai had done what no therapist, no specialist, no amount of money had been able to do. He calmed Leo down. Kai leaned back slightly, his scent fading as he pulled it in. "See? You did that," he said, his voice warm. "You're stronger than those scary feelings. And your dad's right here to help you too." He glanced up at Silas, his green eyes meeting Silas's amber ones. For a split second, something passed between them, something hot and sharp, a spark of tension that Silas couldn't explain. It was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by Kai's calm neutrality. Leo yawned, his head dropping onto Silas's shoulder. Tired, he mumbled, his eyes fluttering shut. Silas's arms tightened around his son, a wave of relief washing over him, so strong it made his knees weak. He looked up at Kai, his voice softer than it had been in months. "What's your full name?" "Kai Bennett," Kai replied, standing slowly. He picked up his tray, his movements graceful. "I've been working here for 3 months. Part-time while I finish my nursing degree." A nurse. That explained the calm, the knowledge of panic attacks, the way he'd handled Leo without hesitation. Silas nodded, his mind racing. He needed Kai. Not just as a server, not just as a temporary fix, but as something more. Something permanent. He'd do whatever it took to keep Leo calm, to give his son a chance at normalcy. Even if it meant breaking every rule he'd ever lived by. Even if it meant letting an Omega into his most sacred spaces, into his family, into his life. "Your shift ends at 10, Silas said, his voice firm. "I want you to meet me in my office at 10:15. Don't be late." Kai's eyebrows lifted. "Sir, you're no longer on serving duty," Silas explained. "I'm offering you a new position. Full-time living. You'll be responsible for Leo's emotional well-being, helping him manage his panic attacks, working with his therapist, whatever he needs. In return, I'll pay you $15,000 a month, cover your nursing school tuition, and provide medical insurance for you and any family you have." The room erupted in murmurs. Gideon looked like he was going to explode. "Silas, are you out of your mind?" he hissed. "An Omega? Living in the mansion? Around Leo? Around you? It's a liability." Silas ignored him. His gaze stayed on Kai, watching his reaction. Kai's green eyes narrowed slightly, his lips pressing into a thin line. He wasn't overwhelmed by the offer, wasn't falling to his knees in gratitude like Silas expected. Instead, he looked cautious. "What are the terms?" Kai asked, his voice steady. "Beyond the pay and the tuition. What are the rules?" Silas felt a flicker of interest. Most people would have jumped at the offer, no questions asked. But Kai was asking for boundaries, for respect. It was a bold move, one that Silas found himself admiring. "You'll have your own wing of the mansion," he said, listing the terms slowly, deliberately. "Complete privacy. No one will enter without your permission. You won't be required to perform any duties outside of Leo's care. You won't be touched without your consent, by me, by anyone. Your secondary gender is irrelevant here. You're an employee first. But if you ever betray me, if you ever hurt Leo, there's no place on this earth I won't find you." Kai's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "And if I refuse?" Silas shrugged, though his heart clenched at the thought. "Then you walk out that door, and we never speak of this again." "But Leo, he needs someone who can calm him like you did. Someone who understands what he's going through." He paused, his voice softening, just enough to be noticeable. "I need someone who can do that." Kai stared at him for a long moment, his green eyes searching Silas's face. Silas held his gaze, letting him see the desperation beneath the calm, the fear that he was failing his son in ways he couldn't fix. Finally, Kai nodded. "I'll take the job," he said. But I have one condition of my own. Silas raised an eyebrow. Name it. You don't get to hide from him, Kai said quietly. From Leo. You're his father, not just his protector. He's scared of your power, of your scent, of the world you live in. But he still needs you. You have to try. Really try. Not just throw money at therapists or build safe rooms. Try to be soft. For him, Silas's breath caught in his throat. No one had ever dared to demand something like this from him. No one had ever told him he needed to be soft. But as he looked down at Leo, his son's face peaceful in his sleep for the first time in months, he knew Kai was right. Power had built his empire, but it was tearing his family apart. Deal, Silas said, his voice gruff. Kai nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. I'll be in your office at 10:15. He turned to leave, his steps quiet as he exited the lounge. The lieutenants exploded into argument the moment the door closed. Gideon was the loudest, screaming about betrayal, about weakness, about the danger of letting an Omega into the inner circle. Silas tuned them out, his gaze fixed on Leo's sleeping face. He brushed a strand of dark hair away from his son's forehead, his touch gentle, gentler than he'd ever been with anyone, even Elias. Meeting adjourned, he said, standing up. Leo stirred slightly, his small hand fisting in Silas's shirt. Silas held him closer, his pheromones wrapping around them. Softer now, calmer, not dominant, just protective. Gideon, stay. The rest of you, get out. And if I hear one word about this to anyone outside this room, you'll regret it. The lieutenants filed out, their heads down. Gideon stayed, his face red with anger. Silas, you can't do this, he said, his voice low. An Omega? He's going to manipulate you. He's going to use Leo to get to your power. You're being foolish. Silas turned to him, his amber eyes cold. Kai didn't ask for power. He asked for respect. Something you wouldn't know anything about. He paused, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. And if you ever speak about him like that again, if you ever threaten him, I'll send your body to your wife in pieces. Am I clear? Gideon paled, but he nodded. Yes, sir. Good. Silas turned toward the door, Leo still sleeping soundly in his arms. Get out of my sight. As Silas walked down the hallway to Leo's bedroom, he couldn't stop thinking about Kai. About his green eyes, his calm voice, his quiet courage. About the way his scent had wrapped around him like a blanket. About the spark of tension that had passed between them. It was dangerous, letting an Omega into his life, into his home. But for Leo, Silas would risk it. Even if it meant confronting parts of himself he'd buried long ago. Parts that craved something more than power, something softer, something real. He laid Leo down on his bed, tucking the covers around him gently. The boy mumbled in his sleep, reaching for the stuffed rabbit on his pillow, Elias's rabbit, the one he'd had since he was a baby. Silas brushed a kiss against his forehead, his heart aching. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm going to do better. I promise. He left the room, closing the door quietly behind him. His office was at the end of the hallway, a large room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. He poured himself a glass of bourbon, sipping it slowly as he waited for Kai. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching into an eternity. Silas found himself replaying the scene in the lounge, Kai's calm voice, his steady gaze, the way he'd handled Leo with such care. It was a stark contrast to the world Silas lived in, violent, cruel, unforgiving. Kai was a breath of fresh air, and Silas was terrified of what he might do to hold on to it. The knock on the door came exactly at 10:15. Silas set down his glass. Come in. Kai entered, his hair still tied back, his shirt slightly wrinkled from the day's work. He carried a small duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I brought a few things, he said, gesturing to the bag. In case you wanted me to start tonight. Silas nodded. Leo's room is down the hall. Your wing is on the 3rd floor. Take the elevator. It's keycard access. I'll have a staff member bring your things up. For now, let's go over the details. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit. Kai sat, his back straight, his hands resting on his lap. He didn't fidget, didn't avoid Silas's gaze. He just waited, calm and patient. Silas found himself staring at him, at the way his green eyes caught the light, at the faint scar on his left cheek, thin, barely noticeable, like he'd been cut with a knife. Silas wondered how he'd gotten it, wondered what kind of life Kai had led before working as a server at his mansion. But he didn't ask. Not yet. The schedule is flexible, Silas said, pulling a folder from his desk. Leo's therapists come twice a week, Wednesdays and Saturdays. You'll be present for those sessions. You'll accompany him to school, to his doctor's appointments, whatever he needs. You'll have access to all of his medical records, his therapy notes, anything that might help you understand his triggers. He slid the folder across the desk to Kai. This has all the details, emergency contacts, his medication, though he rarely needs it, his favorite foods, the things that calm him down besides. Will you? Kai picked up the folder, flipping through it quickly. His fingers were long, slender, with calluses on his palms, like he worked with his hands. Silas's gaze lingered on them, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. He quickly looked away, focusing on the lake outside the window. Is there anything else I need to know? Kai asked, closing the folder. Silas hesitated. There was something he needed to say, something important. My pheromones, he said, his voice gruff. I'm trying to control them around Leo. But sometimes it's instinct. If I get too close, if I'm angry or stressed, they might spike. If that happens, I need you to tell me. Don't be afraid to speak up. For Leo's sake. Kai's green eyes softened. I will. But you have to let me. You have to listen. Silas nodded. I will. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the clock and the waves crashing against the shore outside. Silas found himself staring at Kai again, at the way his lips were pressed into a thin line, at the way his Adam's apple bobbed when he swallowed. There was something about him, something magnetic, something that drew Silas in despite his better judgment. He felt a spark of attraction, hot and unexpected, and quickly pushed it down. Kai was an employee. Leo es Kekev. Nothing more. I should go check on Leo, Kai said, standing up. He picked up his duffel bag. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Voss. Silas, he found himself saying. When we're not in front of the lieutenants, when it's just us and Leo, call me Silas. Kai's eyebrows lifted, but he nodded. Thank you, Silas. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, he said, his voice soft, you're not a bad father. You're just scared. And that's okay. The door closed behind him, leaving Silas alone in his office. He picked up his bourbon glass, draining it in one gulp. Scared. Kai was right. He was scared, scared of failing Leo, scared of losing the last piece of Elias he had left, scared of the feelings Kai was stirring in him. Feelings that hadn't been there since Elias died. Feelings that were dangerous, that could weaken him, that could get him killed. But as he thought about Leo's peaceful face, about the way Kai had calmed him with just a few words and a wisp of his scent, Silas knew he didn't care. For the first time in months, he felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that Leo could heal. Hope that he could be a better father. Hope that there was more to life than power and control. He stood up, walking to the window. The moon was bright over the lake, casting silver light across the water. Silas thought about Kai's green eyes, his calm voice, his quiet courage. He thought about the spark of tension between them, the way his body had reacted to Kai's scent, the way he'd craved to be closer to him. It was wrong. It was dangerous. It was everything Silas had ever avoided. But for the first time in his life, Silas Voss was willing to break his own rules. The next morning, Silas woke earlier than usual. He found Kai in the kitchen, standing at the counter, making pancakes. Leo was sitting on a stool next to him, watching intently, his eyes wide with wonder. Kai was wearing a pair of gray sweatpants and a black hoodie, his hair messy from sleep. He looked softer like this, less composed, more human. Silas leaned against the doorframe, watching them, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. "Can I help?" Leo asked, reaching for the spatula. Kai smiled, handing it to him carefully. "Sure. Just be gentle. We don't want to flip it too early, or it will break." Leo nodded, his small hands gripping the spatula tightly. He watched the pancake bubble, then carefully flipped it. It landed perfectly, golden brown on both sides. Leo let out a cheer, clapping his hands. "I did it." "You did," Kai said, grinning. "See? You're a natural." Silas cleared his throat, stepping into the kitchen. Leo's head snapped up, his smile fading slightly as he tensed. Silas's heart sank. He'd hoped the progress from last night would carry over, but old habits died hard. Kai noticed, placing a hand on Leo's shoulder gently. "Daddy's here," he said softly. "He's not going to hurt you. Remember, we talked about breathing if you feel scared." Leo took a deep breath, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "Hi, Daddy," he said, his voice quiet. "Hi, buddy," Silas replied, his voice softer than usual. He walked over to the counter, keeping a safe distance from Leo. "Pancakes look good. Kai's teaching me how to make them," Leo said, his eyes lighting up. "I flipped one all by myself." "I saw," Silas said, smiling. It felt strange, smiling like this. Genuine, not forced. But Leo's excitement was contagious. "That's impressive." Kai glanced at him, his green eyes warm. "Want some?" "I made extra." Silas nodded, sitting down at the table. Kai placed a plate of pancakes in front of him, drizzled with maple syrup and topped with fresh berries. Silas took a bite, and his eyes widened. They were the best pancakes he'd ever had, fluffy sweet, just the right amount of cinnamon. "These are amazing," he said, surprised. Kai shrugged, but Silas noticed the faint flush of his cheeks. "I used to cook for my little sister," he said. "She's a picky eater, so I had to get creative." "Where is she?" Silas asked before he could stop himself. He didn't usually ask personal questions, didn't care about the lives of his employees. But with Kai, he found himself curious. "She's in college," Kai said, flipping another pancake. "Studying art. I send her money every month to help with tuition." Silas nodded. He thought about Kai's condition from the night before, his refusal to be bought, his demand for respect. It made sense now. He was working 2 jobs to support his sister, to finish his own degree. He wasn't here for Silas's money, not really. He was here because he cared about Leo, because he was good at it. Leo finished his pancake, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Kai, can we go to the park later?" "The one with the swings." Kai looked at Silas, seeking his permission. Silas nodded. "That's fine. I'll have a driver take you. And security will be nearby, but they won't interfere unless you need them." Leo's face lit up. "Thank you, Daddy." He jumped off the stool, running over to Silas and hugging his leg quickly before pulling away, like he was scared of overstepping. Silas froze, his heart racing. It was the first time Leo had hugged him since the bombing. He slowly reached down, placing a hand on Leo's head gently. Leo didn't flinch. "You're welcome, buddy," Silas said, his voice thick with emotion. Kai watched them, his green eyes soft. Silas met his gaze, and for a moment, time stood still. The air between them hummed with tension, warm, electric, something that Silas couldn't name. Kai's cheeks flushed slightly, and he quickly looked away, focusing on cleaning up the kitchen. Silas's gaze lingered on his neck, on the way his hoodie slid down, revealing a patch of pale skin. He wanted to touch it, to feel the warmth of Kai's skin beneath his fingers. He quickly pushed the thought away, standing up. "I have a meeting this morning," he said, his voice gruff. "I'll be back by noon. If you need anything, call me." Will do, Kai replied, not looking up. Silas walked out of the kitchen, his heart racing. He couldn't stop thinking about Kai, about his smile, his green eyes, the way he'd interacted with Leo, the tension between them. It was wrong. It was dangerous. But he couldn't seem to help himself. The meeting was a disaster. Silas couldn't focus, his mind wandering back to the kitchen, to Leo's hug, to Kai's flushed cheeks. Gideon noticed, shooting him pointed looks throughout the meeting. Silas snapped at him twice, his patience wearing thin. By the time the meeting ended, Silas was ready to snap. He returned to the mansion at noon, finding Kai and Leo in the living room. Leo was sitting on the floor, building a fort out of blankets and pillows. Kai was sitting next to him, helping him stack the pillows, his laughter soft as Leo knocked them over. Silas leaned against the doorframe, watching them. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine it, to imagine that this was his life, that Kai was more than an employee, that they were a family. It was a dangerous fantasy, but Silas couldn't seem to shake it. Kai looked up, noticing him. His laughter died down, his green eyes locking onto Silas's. "You're back early," he said, standing up. "Meeting ended early," Silas replied, walking into the room. Leo looked up, smiling. "Daddy, look at our fort." He crawled inside, peeking out. "It's a safe fort. No scary alphas allowed." Silas's heart sank. Kai noticed, placing a hand on Silas's arm gently. The touch was brief, but it sent a jolt of electricity through Silas's body. "He doesn't mean you," Kai said quietly. "He just means the ones who yell, who have scary sense. You're different." "Am I?" Silas asked, his voice low. "Because I'm an alpha too. I yell. I have a scary scent. I'm the same as them." "No, you're not," Kai replied, his green eyes serious. "You're trying. That's more than most alphas would do." Leo notices. He just doesn't know how to say it yet. He paused, his voice softening. "Give him time. Give yourself time." Silas nodded. He wanted to believe Kai, but doubt gnawed at him. He was a criminal, a killer, a man who ruled with fear and violence. Could he ever be the father Leo needed? Could he ever be the man Kai seemed to think he was? "I need to talk to you," Silas said, his voice gruff. "Alone." Kai's eyebrows lifted, but he nodded. "Leo, can you stay here and finish the fort?" "I'll be right back." Leo nodded, crawling back into the fort. "Don't take too long. We need to test it out." Silas led Kai to his office, closing the door behind them. He walked over to the window, his back to Kai. "I need to know," he said, his voice low. "Why did you take this job? It's not just the money, is it? You could have gotten a nursing job, something safer, something that doesn't involve me, doesn't involve this world." Kai walked over to the desk, leaning against it. His green eyes were calm as they locked onto Silas's. "I took this job because I care about Leo," he said quietly. "Because I know what it's like to be scared, to feel like the world is too big, too loud. I lost my parents when I was 10. My sister and I bounced around foster homes for years. Most of them were alphas, loud, angry, dominant. They made me feel small, like I didn't matter. Like my feelings were a burden." He paused, his voice softening. "I don't want Leo to feel that way. I want him to know that his feelings matter, that he's safe, that he's loved." Silas turned to face him, his amber eyes searching Kai's. "And what about me?" he asked, his voice gruff. "What do you think of me? Do you see me as one of those alphas? Loud, angry, dominant, a burden?" Kai's gaze softened. "No," he said. "I see a man who's scared, a man who's lost, a man who loves his son more than anything, but doesn't know how to show it. You're not a burden, Silas. You're just human." Silas's breath caught in his throat. No one had ever called him human before. He was Silas Voss, gangster, alpha killer, not human. Not someone who felt, who grieved, who was scared. But Kai saw him. He saw the man beneath the power, beneath the violence. And for some reason, he didn't run. He stepped closer to Kai, closing the distance between them. Kai didn't back away, his green eyes calm as they locked onto Silas's. The air between them hummed with tension, warm, electric, something that Silas couldn't name. He could smell Kai's scent, cedar and rain, warm and grounding. He wanted to bury his face in Kai's neck, to breathe him in, to feel the warmth of his body against his. Kai, Silas said, his voice low. He was cut off by a knock on the door. Sir, it was one of the security guards. There's a call for you. It's the Chicago PD. They say it's urgent. Silas pulled back, his jaw tightening. The moment was broken. He took a deep breath, composing himself. I'll be right there. He turned to Kai, his voice gruff. We'll finish this later. Kai nodded, his cheeks flushed slightly. Okay. Silas walked out of the office, his heart racing. He couldn't stop thinking about Kai, about his words, his gaze, the tension between them. He couldn't stop wanting him. But he had a job to do, an empire to run, a son to protect. The call was about Elias. The police had found new evidence about the bombing, evidence that suggested it wasn't a rival family, but someone closer to home, someone inside the organization. Silas's blood ran cold. He'd spent months blaming the Moretti family, vowing revenge. But if the police were right, then the enemy was within. He hung up the phone, his mind racing. He needed to find out who did it. He needed to make them pay. But first, he needed to protect Leo, to protect Kai. He returned to the living room, finding Kai and Leo inside the fort. Leo was asleep, his head resting on Kai's lap. Kai was sitting cross-legged, reading a book, his fingers brushing gently through Leo's hair. Silas leaned against the doorframe, watching them. For a moment, he forgot about the bombing, about the enemy within, about the danger that surrounded them. He just watched Kai, his heart full of something that he couldn't name. Kai looked up, noticing him. He smiled softly, placing a finger to his lips. He fell asleep, he whispered. Long day of building forts. Silas nodded, walking into the room. He knelt down next to the fort, looking at Leo's peaceful face. Thank you, he said quietly, for taking care of him. Kai's green eyes softened. It's my job. Silas shook his head. No, it's more than that. You care about him. He cares about you. He paused, his voice low. I care about you. Kai's breath caught in his throat. His green eyes widened, his cheeks flushing. Silas. I know it's wrong, Silas said, cutting him off. I know you're an employee. I know I'm your boss. I know it's dangerous. But I can't help it. Every time I look at you, every time I hear your voice, every time I smell your scent, I want you. I need you. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair away from Kai's face. His fingers lingered on Kai's cheek, warm and soft. I haven't felt this way about anyone since Elias. I thought I'd never feel this way again. Kai's eyes glistened with tears. He leaned into Silas's touch, his lips parting slightly. Silas, he whispered. He was cut off by the sound of a gunshot. It was loud, echoing through the mansion. Silas's body tensed, his alpha instincts flaring. He pulled Kai and Leo close, shielding them with his body. The fort collapsed around them, blankets and pillows falling everywhere. Stay here, Silas snarled, pushing Kai and Leo behind a couch. Don't move. Don't make a sound. He stood up, reaching for the gun hidden in his waistband. The mansion was quiet, too quiet. The gunshot had come from upstairs. Silas moved quickly, his footsteps silent as he raced toward the stairs. He could hear voices, shouts, gunfire, the sound of glass breaking. The enemy was here. They'd found him. They'd found his family. Silas's blood ran cold. He thought about Leo, about Kai, about the life he'd started to imagine. He couldn't lose them. He wouldn't lose them. He rounded the corner, coming face to face with Gideon. He was standing at the top of the stairs, a gun in his hand. His pheromones were sharp with anger, with betrayal. Behind him, 2 other lieutenants stood, their guns drawn. Gideon, Silas said, his voice cold. "What the hell are you doing?" Gideon laughed, harsh, bitter sound. "What am I doing? I'm saving this family, saving this empire." "You've gone soft, Silas. Weak. All because of that Omega. All because of that kid." He gestured toward the living room. "You're not the alpha you used to be. You're a liability. And liabilities get eliminated." Silas's jaw tightened. "You're the one who bombed my car. You're the one who killed Elias." Gideon nodded, no shame in his eyes. "Elias was a weakness. Just like that Omega. Just like that kid. You couldn't see it, but I did. I tried to warn you, but you didn't listen. So I had to take matters into my own hands." He raised his gun, pointing it at Silas. "Now step aside. I'm going to kill the Omega, kill the kid, and take back what's mine." Silas's anger flared hot, his pheromones spiking, dominant, feral, deadly. "Over my dead body." Gideon fired. Silas dodged, the bullet hitting the wall behind him. He fired back, hitting one of the lieutenants in the chest. The man fell backward, his gun clattering to the floor. Gideon fired again, missing Silas by inches. Silas charged forward, tackling Gideon to the ground. The gun skittered away, sliding down the stairs. They fought, rolling across the floor, their fists flying. Gideon was younger, stronger, but Silas was angrier. He thought about Elias, about his smile, about the way he loved Leo. He thought about Leo, about his laugh, about his hug this morning. He thought about Kai, about his green eyes, about his calm voice, about the tension between them. He thought about the life he wanted, the life he was willing to fight for. Silas landed a punch to Gideon's jaw, knocking him unconscious. He stood up, his chest heaving, his knuckles bloodied. The other lieutenant was gone, fled. Silas didn't care. He just wanted to get back to Kai and Leo. He raced down the stairs, returning to the living room. Kai was sitting on the floor, Leo in his arms. Leo was awake, crying softly. Kai was holding him tightly, his body shaking, but his eyes were calm as they locked onto Silas's. "Are you okay?" Silas asked, dropping to his knees next to them. He checked Kai for injuries, his hand shaking as he touched Kai's arms, his chest, his neck. "We're okay," Kai replied, his voice shaky. "Leo's scared, but he's not hurt." Silas pulled them both into his arms, holding them tightly. Leo cried into his chest, his small hands fisting in Silas's shirt. Kai leaned into him, his head resting on Silas's shoulder. Silas could smell his fear, his relief, his calm sense still lingering beneath it. He could feel Kai's heartbeat against his chest, fast and steady. "I'm sorry," Silas whispered. "I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better." "You did," Kai replied, his voice soft. "You always do." Silas pulled back, looking at Kai. His green eyes were glistening with tears, his cheeks flushed. Silas leaned in, his lips brushing against Kai's. The kiss was soft, tentative, something that had been building between them for days. Kai's lips parted, and Silas deepened the kiss, his hands tangling in Kai's hair. Leo's crying stopped, and he looked up, confused. "Daddy?" he asked. Silas pulled back, smiling at him. "It's okay, buddy. Kai and I, we care about each other. A lot." Leo nodded, his eyes widening. "Does that mean Kai is going to be my other daddy?" Silas's heart raced. He looked at Kai, his amber eyes searching Kai's green ones. Kai's cheeks flushed, but he smiled, nodding. "If that's what you want," he said softly. Silas turned back to Leo, his voice soft. "Is that what you want, buddy?" Leo smiled, throwing his arms around both of them. Yes, I want Kai to be my daddy. Silas and Kai looked at each other, their smiles soft. The air between them hummed with warmth, with love, with something that Silas had never thought he'd find again. The danger wasn't over. Gideon was in custody, but there were still enemies, still threats. But for now, they were safe. They were together. Silas leaned in, kissing Kai again. This time, the kiss was deeper, more passionate, a promise of things to come. Kai kissed him back, his hands wrapping around Silas's neck. Leo giggled, burying his face in Silas's chest. Silas Voss had built his empire on power, on control, on never letting them see him break. But in that moment, he realized that the greatest power of all wasn't dominance. It was love. It was Leo's laugh, Kai's smile, the warmth of their bodies against his. It was the courage to be soft, to be vulnerable, to let someone in. For the first time in his life, Silas Voss was home. The mansion settled into a fragile hush in the hours after the shooting. Guards swarmed every corridor. Patrols doubled at the iron gates, and trusted lieutenants swept the grounds for any remaining loyalists of Gideon. Silas had ordered Gideon locked in the reinforced basement cell. No visitors, no communication with the outside world, only waiting for Silas to decide his fate. He'd refused to leave Kai and Leo's side for even a minute. Leo clung to Kai like a lifeline, his small hands never straying far from the fabric of Kai's hoodie. The boy's earlier panic had faded into quiet weariness, his eyes heavy with exhaustion, yet he refused to sleep unless Kai was within arm's reach. Silas sat on the carpet beside the couch, his shoulder pressed lightly to Kai's, the weight of the day settling deep in his bones. The air between them still hummed with the lingering heat of their stolen kiss, soft and charged, thick with unspoken words neither dared rush to voice. It was the kind of quiet pull that hung in every glance, every accidental brush of skin, every shared breath when they leaned close to check on Leo. Kai kept one hand resting gently on Leo's hair, his head tilted down, but his peripheral awareness never left Silas. He could feel the alpha's gaze fixed on him, heavy and warm, like sunlight trapped behind storm clouds, intense, possessive, yet stripped of the usual brutal dominance Silas carried in every room. "You don't have to stay glued here," Kai murmured after a long stretch of silence, his voice low enough not to rouse the dozing boy. "Your men need you upstairs. You have an empire to steady, loose ends to tie." Silas's jaw tightened faintly, his amber eyes locking onto Kai's profile. "My empire can wait. You two come first now." The quiet certainty in his words made Kai's breath catch. He finally lifted his head, turning to meet Silas's gaze fully. Their faces were close, closer than they'd ever allowed themselves to be before. Close enough that Silas could catch the faint cedar and rain warmth of Kai's pheromones without straining. Close enough Kai could see the raw vulnerability hidden beneath the alpha's hardened exterior. It was a dangerous proximity, the kind that made pulse quicken and walls slip down inch by inch. "Silas," Kai started, his tone careful, tethered to reason even as his body leaned ever so slightly toward the other man. "What happened earlier, the kiss, what you said, we can't let fear or chaos blur the lines. I'm here for Leo first. You're my employer. This world you live in isn't safe for casual feelings, let alone something deeper." Silas's gaze dropped to Kai's lips for half a second, slow and deliberate, before dragging back up to his green eyes. The pull between them sharpened, quiet and insistent, a slow burn neither could ignore. "I'm not asking for casual," Silas rumbled, his voice deepened, laced with alpha pheromones held tightly in check. No dominance, no pressure, only quiet yearning. "I've never done casual. Not with Elias, not with anyone. What I feel for you isn't a reaction to the shooting, isn't gratitude for calming Leo. It's been building since the second you stepped into that meeting room and dared to look me in the eye without flinching." Kai's atoms apple-bobbed. He tried to look away, to break the hypnotic hold of Silas's stare, but he couldn't. Every logical argument hovered on his tongue. The power imbalance, the danger of being involved with a Mafia alpha, the risk to his sister, the risk to Leo's fragile peace. But none of it landed when Silas looked at him like that, like Kai was the only steady thing in a world that never stopped shaking. You're used to everyone bending to your will, Kai whispered, holding his ground even as his resolve wavered. Used to taking what you want, no pushback. I don't bend that easily. I won't be a secret tucked away in this mansion. I won't be a distraction you outgrow once Leo's healed. For a heartbeat, Silas's expression softened, no trace of the ruthless kingpin left. I don't want you to bend. That's the last thing I want. I want you exactly as you are, steady, unafraid, kind enough to calm a terrified child, bold enough to call me out when I'm wrong. He shifted a fraction closer, not crowding, just closing the small gaps still between them. I don't do secrets either. If we do this, it's open. To the household, to my men, to Leo. No hiding, no pretending. Before Kai could reply, Leo stirred in his lap, a small mumble slipping past his lips as he snuggled deeper into Kai's chest. The moment broke, the charged tension softening into quiet tenderness. Kai's attention drifted instantly to the boy, his fingers brushing soothingly over his hair, and Silas let out a slow, quiet breath, grounding himself again. Later, once Leo had finally fallen into a deep, untroubled sleep in his bed, Kai stepped out into the hallway to find Silas leaning against the wall, waiting for him. The corridor was dimly lit by wall sconces, shadows stretching long across the marble floor, wrapping around them like a private bubble cut off from the rest of the chaotic mansion. No guards lingered nearby. No staff dared pass this wing. It was just them, alone with the unspoken tension thrumming in the air. Is he out? Silas asked, his voice low. Kai nodded, stopping a polite distance away, but his feet didn't move to leave. He's exhausted. The adrenaline crashed hard. He'll sleep through the night, I think. Silas pushed off the wall, taking one slow step toward him. Can we talk properly now? No distractions, no little ears listening in. Kai hesitated, then gave a small, conceding nod. They walked in quiet tandem down the hall to Silas's private study, the door clicking shut behind them with a soft finality. The room smelled of old books, polished wood, and the faint smoky undertone of Silas's natural alpha scent, sharp, earthy, restrained. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the dark lake, moonlight spilling over the water and painting pale streaks across the carpet. Silas leaned against the edge of his desk, arms folded loosely over his chest, his gaze fixed steadily on Kai as he stood near the window. The silence stretched, thick and warm, filled only by the distant crash of waves outside. You told me once you grew up bouncing between alpha foster homes, Silas said finally, breaking the quiet. Loud, angry alphas who made you feel small. That's why you understand Leo so well. Kai's shoulders relaxed slightly at the gentle shift to softer topics, no longer pressed straight with guarded tension. Yeah, I learned early how to read alpha pheromones before they even raised their voices. Learned how to stay quiet, how to shrink into the background, until I got old enough to stop shrinking entirely. A faint, bitter smile tugged at his lips. Being an omega in a world run by unregulated alphas means you either submit or learn to hold your ground without picking fights. Silas studied him, the quiet strength in his posture, the calm fire in his green eyes, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence rather than the expected meekness of most omegas in elite Mafia circles. It only made the pull stronger. You never shrank from me, Silas noted. I saw no point to it, Kai replied simply. You were intimidating, yes, but you weren't cruel for cruelty's sake. You were grieving, stressed, terrified of failing your son. I didn't need to bow to that. I just needed to be calm enough to cut through the noise. Silas pushed off the desk and crossed the room slowly, stopping only a foot away from Kai. The proximity sent a faint shiver down Kai's spine, his omega instincts prickling at the nearness of such a powerful, controlled alpha. Yet he didn't step back, didn't drop his gaze. He held Silas's stare, steady and unyielding. The hung thick between them now, Silas's eyes drifting slowly from Kai's eyes to his lips, then down to the line of his jaw, before drifting back up, a silent, deliberate caress without touching. Kai's breath hitched almost imperceptibly, his fingers curling loosely at his sides to keep from reaching out. "I've spent 6 months living half alive," Silas murmured, his voice dropping to a rough, intimate timbre only for Kai's ears. "Existing only to run the empire and keep Leo safe, feeling nothing but grief and cold control. Then you walked in. One look at you, one breath of your scent, and something locked back inside me broke open all at once." He lifted his hand slowly, giving Kai every chance to pull away, to step back, to set a boundary. When Kai didn't move, didn't flinch, Silas's palm settled gently against Kai's jaw, warm and firm, his thumb brushing soft over the curve of his cheek. The touch sent a jolt of heat through Kai's entire body, his omega pheromones flaring soft and involuntary, cedar and rain wrapping gently around them both, calm and yearning all at once. "I don't want to rush you," Silas whispered, his forehead dipping closer, their breaths mingling now. "I won't push for more than you're ready to give. But I'm not walking away from this. From you. Whatever you need, time, space, rules, boundaries, I'll respect it all. Just don't make me stay at arm's length forever." Kai's eyes fluttered shut for a moment, letting himself sink into the warmth of Silas's touch, the quiet sincerity in his voice. For so long he'd kept his heart guarded, focused only on surviving, on supporting his sister, on caring for children who carried the same quiet scars he did. He'd never allowed himself to want something this risky, this tangled, this real. But Silas wasn't like the other alphas he'd known. He was brutal to his enemies, yes, ruthless in his empire, but soft in the ways that mattered, gentle with Leo, humble enough to admit his flaws, willing to learn to be better, willing to wait for Kai instead of demanding compliance. Kai opened his eyes again, his green gaze locking straight into Silas's amber ones, clear and unwavering. "I won't make you wait forever," he said quietly. "But we take it slow. For Leo. For us. No rushing into anything we can't undo. No letting our feelings put him in more danger than he's already in." Relief washed over Silas, warm and sharp. His thumb brushed once more over Kai's cheek, lingering, reluctant to pull away. "Slow I can do. I've spent my whole life moving fast, fighting fast, deciding fast. I can take all the time you need." The tension softened into tender, lingering warmth, neither pulling away nor closing the final small gap to kiss again. They stood there a long moment, close enough to feel each other's body heat, locked in quiet understanding, the unspoken attraction simmering gently beneath the surface instead of burning out of control. It was the kind of slow, deliberate that clung to every quiet moment after that. Days bled into a quiet, fragile routine inside the Voss mansion. Kai settled fully into his role, crafting gentle daily rhythms for Leo, soft morning routines, quiet playtime outdoors, breathing exercises whenever the boy's anxiety spiked, regular sessions with his child therapist, Dr. Elias Romano. The therapist had quickly taken to Kai, recognizing his natural gift for reading trauma and calming overwhelmed young minds, and began working closely with him to unpack Leo's lingering scars from the bombing. Dr. Elias had spoken plainly to Silas in one private office meeting days later, his tone calm but unflinching. "You suppress your pheromones during business, during fights, during negotiations," the beta therapist had said, leaning back in his chair. "But at home you don't track when your alpha aura spikes with stress or anger." Leo associates that sudden dominant surge with explosion, with loss, with fear. It's a trauma imprint he won't unlearn overnight. Silas had stared out the window, his jaw tight. "What's the fix?" "Balance," Elias had said simply. "You can't strip yourself of your alpha nature entirely. That would feel unnatural to him, make him sense something's wrong. You learn restraint. Learn to soften your aura without erasing it. Leo doesn't need you weaker. He needs you safer, quieter, more present." And Kai was the one teaching him how. It happened in small, unnoticeable moments at first. At dinner, when one of Silas's captains spoke too loud, voices rising over shipment delays and territory disputes, Silas's alpha instinct flared instantly, his pheromones sharpened, his posture going rigid, ready to assert dominance and silence the room. Before he could let that aura fully spike, Kai's foot brushed lightly against his under the table, a quiet, subtle grounding touch no one else saw. Kai didn't look at him, didn't draw attention, just kept his gaze on Leo, cutting up the boy's food with gentle focus. But the faint calm drift of his omega pheromones curled toward Silas, soft and steady, a quiet reminder to breathe, to hold back, to soften. Silas exhaled slowly, deliberately reining in his pheromones, letting the sharp dominance fade into quiet authority. The tension in the room eased instantly, and Leo, who tensed halfway in his seat, relaxed back into his chair, continuing to eat without fear. Silas shot a quick sideways glance at Kai, his gaze dark and warm with quiet gratitude and that ever-present lingering pull between them. Kai didn't glance back, but the very corner of his mouth tugged up in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It was their silent rhythm now, small touches, quiet glances, wordless understanding, a slow dance of and care that only they shared. Leo grew brighter by the day. The night terrors faded, the sudden panic attacks grew fewer and farther between. He no longer flinched at heavy footsteps in the hallway, no longer hid when Silas's lieutenants filled the mansion for meetings. He laughed freely now, loud and unguarded, ran through the gardens without hesitation, and began seeking out Silas's company voluntarily, not just clinging to Kai for safety. He started drawing pictures every afternoon, stick figures of himself, tall, broad-shouldered Daddy Silas and soft-smiling Kai, all three holding hands under a sun with scribbled rays. He left them on Silas's desk on Kai's nightstand, taped to the fridge, proud and unashamed of his little family. The staff noticed the shift, the quiet warmth settling over the once cold fortress of a mansion. They watched Silas soften in small ways, lingering longer to watch Leo play, slowing his step when passing Kai in the hallway, choosing quiet evenings with the two of them over endless late-night empire business. The guards and household staff grew used to seeing them together, Kai and Silas side by side in the garden, Leo darting between them, Kai reading to Leo on the couch while Silas sat nearby, pretending to review reports but actually watching them both, quiet breakfast in the kitchen where Silas laughed for the first time in anyone's memory. No one dared whisper a word against it. Silas's quiet devotion to Kai and Leo was clear, and the man who ruled Chicago's underworld with an iron fist was not to be crossed over his chosen family. But trouble didn't stay buried for long. Word spread through underworld circles fast. Silas Voss had softened, had let an Omega into his inner circle, had cast out his own loyal second-command Gideon over a child and a stranger. Rival families began testing borders, pushing into Voss territory, probing for weakness they thought existed. Whispers circulated that Silas was distracted, weakened by sentiment, no longer the cold, unbreakable alpha they feared. Colin Voss, Silas's distant cousin and a sharp, calculating underboss in the family operation, chose that moment to return to the mansion unannounced. He walked in like he owned the place, tailored dark suit, cold sharp eyes, a sneer fixed on his face as he swept through the foyer, dismissing staff with a flick of his wrist. He'd stayed away for months, deliberately avoiding the mansion, waiting to see how Silas's strange new arrangement unfolded, and now he'd come to judge, to challenge, to remind Silas of the brutal rules their world lived by. He found them in the back garden late afternoon, Kai sitting on the grass helping Leo build a wooden block tower, the boy giggling as it toppled over again and again. Silas leaned against a stone bench a few feet away, his posture relaxed, his usual hard edge gone as he watched them, a faint, rare soft smile on his lips. Colin stopped in the garden archway, his gaze sweeping coldly over the scene before him, an Omega comfortable in the heart of Voss property, there laughing freely instead of living in fear, Silas stripped of his ruthless edge. Disapproval rolled off him in waves. "Well," Colin drawled, his voice sharp enough to cut through the garden's quiet warmth. "This is certainly a new sight. Never thought I'd live to see the day Silas Voss turns his fortress into a playground for an Omega and a skittish child." Leo froze instantly at the cold tone, his laughter dying on his lips. He scrambled closer to Kai, tucking himself half behind his shoulder, wide eyes fixed nervously on the unfamiliar man. Kai shifted subtly, placing his body slightly between Leo and Colin, calm but alert, his posture steady and unyielding even as he sized the new alpha up. Silas's smile dropped away completely, his aura sharpening in an instant, dominant, guarded, the ruthless Mafia ruler sliding back into place at the intrusion. He pushed off the bench, stepping forward to stand between Colin and the two on the grass, his gaze cold and unamused. "You weren't invited here, Colin." Colin sauntered further into the garden, unconcerned by Silas's icy tone. "No one needs an invitation to check on the family empire, especially when rumors are flying that you've let your judgment unravel completely." His eyes flicked dismissively over Kai, sweeping him up and down like assessing a piece of disposable furniture. Hiring an Omega to nanny your son is one thing. Letting him live in your wing, letting him soften you until you're no longer fit to rule, that's recklessness bordering on stupidity. Kai didn't flinch at the insult, didn't drop his gaze. He simply kept a gentle hand on Leo's shoulder, murmuring quiet reassurance to the boy under his breath, never taking his eyes off Colin. His calm only seemed to irritate the other alpha more. "Watch your tone," Silas said, his voice low and dangerous, pheromones simmering with quiet warning. "You speak of him with respect, or you leave my grounds now." Colin laughed bitterly. "Respect? For a random Omega who waltzed in and rewired you? You've lost your edge, Silas. You used to build this family on never needing anyone, never letting attachment cloud your choices. Now you let this stranger dictate your mood, your rules, how you act in your own home. You let him make you soft." "I'm not soft," Silas snapped, stepping closer, the tension between the two alphas spiking thick and volatile in the garden air. "I'm human." "There's a difference. Humanity is a weakness in our world," Colin shot back. "Rival families already smell it. They're pushing into our docks, cutting deals behind your back, waiting for you to slip up because you're too busy playing happy family to keep control. Gideon was right. You've let a child's trauma and a pretty Omega turn you blind to the real threats all around us." At the mention of Gideon, Silas's jaw tightened. "Gideon betrayed me, bombed my car, killed Elias. He got exactly what he deserved. Or he got punished for telling you the truth," Colin retorted. "You're choosing sentiment over blood, over the empire our family built. You'd risk everything for an Omega who could leave tomorrow, for a child who'll grow up and leave this house one day." Kai stood slowly then, keeping Leo tucked safely behind him as he stepped forward, his voice quiet but clear, cutting through the alpha clash. "Leo doesn't see weakness in you," he said, locking eyes steadily with Colin. "He sees safety. He sees a father willing to learn to be gentle instead of hiding behind dominance. The rival families don't smell weakness, they smell change. And change only scares men like you who've always hidden behind cruelty and power instead of ever learning to care for anyone." Colin's head snapped toward Kai, his gaze sharp with anger. "You do not speak in family business, Omega. This doesn't concern you. It concerns the child behind me, who still flinches at angry alpha voices," Kai replied, unyielding. "It concerns the man I've watched stay up night after night learning to calm his son, learning to hold back his temper, learning to be more than a kingpin. You mistake restraint for weakness. You mistake kindness for fragility. That's your blindness, not Silas's." Silas stood frozen for heartbeat, watching Kai stand unafraid against a hostile alpha twice his size, defending him without hesitation, defending Leo without compromise. The quiet admiration swelled into something deeper, the lingering between them flaring hotter, a quiet pride settling heavy in his chest. No one had ever stood up for him like that, not against family, not against the underworld, not without fear. Colin's pheromones spiked with territorial rage, thick and aggressive, rolling over the garden in a heavy wave meant to intimidate any lesser Omega into submission. Leo whimpered quietly, pressing his face into Kai's back. Instantly, Kai let his own calm Omega pheromones unfurl, wrapping tight around Leo to shield him from the hostile aura, steady and unshaken despite the other alpha's display. He didn't match Colin's aggression, didn't challenge his dominance outright. He simply protected the child beside him, calm and unbreakable. Enough. Silas's voice cut through the tension like a blade, his own alpha aura crashing forward to overpower Colin's, sharp and unassailable, forcing the other man's pheromones back down. You came here to lecture me, to insult my family, to stir division. You've said your piece. Now leave. Colin's nostrils flared, but he couldn't stand against Silas's full dominant surge. He knew he'd lost the silent power struggle already. This isn't over, he bit out. I won't stand by and watch you burn the Voss Empire to the ground for a fleeting infatuation and a broken child. The others are watching, waiting, and when you fall, I'll be the one to pick up the pieces. With one final cold glance at Kai and Leo, Colin turned on his heel and stormed out of the garden, his footsteps sharp and echoing across the stone path. The second he was gone, the heavy tension seeped out of the air. Silas turned immediately to Kai and Leo, stepping over to kneel in front of the boy, his voice softening completely. You all right, buddy? Did his loud voice scare you? Leo peeked out from behind Kai, his eyes still wide, but he nodded slowly. A little. But Kai kept me safe. Silas's gaze lifted to meet Kai's, warm and heavy with unspoken feeling. He always does. Kai's cheeks flushed faintly at the quiet praise, his gaze darting away for a split second before returning to Silas's face, holding it steady once more. The charged pull between them lingered, thick and tender, amplified by the way Kai had stood beside him, defended him, stood unafraid for Leo's sake. That evening, after Leo had been tucked into bed and the mansion quieted down again, Kai found Silas alone on the back terrace, staring out over the dark lake, a glass of bourbon in his hand untouched. The night air was cool, a faint breeze carrying the scent of lake water and late autumn frost. Kai leaned against the terrace railing a polite distance away, not pushing him to his space, just keeping him company in the quiet dark. You don't have to stay out here alone brooding, Kai said softly after a while. Silas didn't turn around. I'm not brooding, just thinking. About what Colin said. About the rivals pushing borders. About whether I'm really being foolish, letting my heart lead instead of my head. Kai pushed off the railing and walked slowly to stand beside him, shoulder nearly brushing his, their gazes both fixed on the moonlit water. You're not foolish for choosing your family over endless power plays. You're human for it. Power can keep enemies away. It can guard warehouses and territories. But it can never guard a child's heart. Never build a real home. Silas turned to look at him then, the moonlight catching the edges of Kai's hair, softening the line of his jaw, making his green eyes glow faintly in the dark. The pull swelled again, quiet and inevitable, no longer hidden behind daily routines or outside conflict. You stood up for me today, Silas murmured, his voice low in the night air. Against Colin, against the hostile alpha, twice your standing. Most omegas in this world would have stayed quiet, kept their head down, not dared to cross someone like him. Kai shrugged faintly. I didn't do it for your reputation. I did it because he was wrong about you. Wrong about Leo. No one gets to stand there and dismiss the both of you like you're nothing. Silas's gaze drifted down to Kai's lips, slow and deliberate, then back up to his eyes. The space between them felt smaller now, the night wrapping around them in privacy, cutting off the rest of the world entirely. I want to stop taking it slow for a little while, Silas whispered, his hand lifting to brush a strand of hair from Kai's face, his touch gentle and reverent. Not rush anything permanent. Just stop staying at arm's length when all I want is to be close to you. Kai's breath hitched, but he didn't pull away. He leaned almost imperceptibly into Silas's touch, his green eyes holding his amber ones without hesitation. What exactly are you asking for? More of this, Silas said quietly, his thumb brushing soft over Kai's cheek again. More quiet moments. More of us not pretending we're only caregiver and employer. More the pull we both feel, no longer hiding behind rules and boundaries just because the world outside is dangerous. He dipped his head slowly, giving Kai every chance to pull back, to say no, to pause this again. When Kai stayed exactly where he was, eyes fluttering shut in quiet acceptance, Silas pressed his lips gently to Kai's. It was softer than their rushed kiss during the shooting, slower, tender, built from weeks of lingering glances, quiet touches, wordless understanding, and slow burning attraction. Silas kissed him with restraint, reverence, no rush of alpha possession, only quiet yearning and care. Kai melted into it, his hand coming up lightly to rest on Silas's chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath his palm. When they pulled back slowly, foreheads resting lightly together, neither spoke for a long moment. The night breeze brushed past them, calm and cool, the lake stretching dark and endless before them. "I don't regret this," Kai whispered. "Any of it. Coming here, meeting Leo, meeting you. Even with the danger, the family drama, the endless underworld politics." Silas wrapped one arm gently around his waist, pulling him close, holding him soft against his chest. "I don't regret it either. For the first time in years, I have something worth protecting that isn't just an empire or a reputation. I have you. I have Leo. That's more than I ever thought I'd get again." Down inside the mansion, unseen threats continued to gather. Colin wouldn't back down. Rival families would keep testing. Gideon's loyalists still lingered in the shadows, waiting for a chance to strike. The fracture in the Voss family wasn't healed. It had only widened, and the storm wasn't over yet. But on that moonlit terrace, wrapped in each other's quiet warmth, Silas and Kai didn't fear the coming storm. They had each other. They had Leo. They had built something soft and real inside the cold fortress of the mansion, something no amount of underworld politics or family betrayal could easily break. And whatever came next, whatever fights, whatever threats, whatever choices lay ahead, they would face it side by side, slow and steady, bound by care, by understanding, and by the quiet, unshakable love that had grown between them, one lingering glance, one soft touch, one calm moment at a time.